Iowa City Book Festival events are open to everyone and available at no cost, but they rely on your support. Please consider donating to the City of Literature by visiting iowациtybookfestival.org and clicking support. There's also a QR code on the door. Today we will hear from Laura Julier. Laura Julier is a former editor of Fourth Genre. Her essays have appeared in Under the Gum Tree, Essay, and The MacGuffin, and elsewhere. She has co-edited a number of anthologies, including nonfiction, The Teaching of Writing and the Influence of Richard Lloyd Jones, and essays of memory, Writing Midwestern Places. She currently works as a hospital chaplain and lives in Iowa City in a house in front of a dirt alley where once a barred owl lived in an old swamp maple. In her extraordinary debut, Off Izaak Walton Road, The Grace That Comes Through Loss, Laura Julier explores the depths of grief and the journey toward healing. Set in a secluded Iowa River cabin, her memoir follows a path through loss, solitude, and the natural world, ultimately revealing how to find wholeness within sorrow. Laura will be joined in conversation by Thomas Dean. Now, please welcome Laura Julier.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. I have been instructed by my spouse to do a group photo.
We could take it for you.
I am.
Turn it sideways, you'll get more people.
Thank you. I am not good at doing this, and I am likely to forget. But now that's done. Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank all the volunteers, John Kenyon, the Iowa City Book Festival, all the sponsors. This is a great event, and I appreciate you all coming out and not being at the farmer's market. And let me start this. So I just need to say at the beginning, this book came about because of a series of serendipitous events, meeting people. We were just talking about all the connections that happen in Iowa City, even when you don't live here. And I wasn't living here when I met this woman who owned a cabin off Izaak Walton Road, south of town, near the Izaak Walton League. Is the mic working? Yep, okay. And this woman was a very, very private person, and I struggled a lot in writing this about the fact that I was writing about her very special place. And so I made the choice to not use her name. I call her R. So just you'll hear that as I read. The book opens not off Izaak Walton Road, but on a river, but years earlier in a different part of Iowa City where I lived for a number of years. Once I owned a house. It was a small house in Iowa City near Plum Grove, the home of Iowa's first governor. It had begun as a corner grocery store in the early 1900s, but its over-large back door was the only part that still looked like what it had been. Its interior walls were flimsy and its 4 rooms tiny. Although I owned it for only 8 years, and those 8 years are long ago, even now, if I am quiet, I can hear its sounds: a dog barking behind the alley, a child's voice, a father calling, the padded hush of thick gardens, the boards on the back deck, and the brush of snow on the windows. These are the sounds embedded in my blood and my bones. When I close my eyes, I can hear them no matter where I am. I know the smell of earth under the raspberries, the shade of the buds on the lilac bush in the far back corner where I buried the divorce papers. Can remember in my bones the rhythmic thuds when someone walks up the 5 steps to the front door. For years afterwards, my arm muscles and nerve pathways and internal clocks were all still finely attuned to that house, its sounds and its angles. Although I owned it for only 8 years, they may as well have been 28. In that house, I lived with my first cat. I learned to till a garden, that blood meal will repel rabbits, that garter snakes hang in raspberry canes, and that fledgling cardinals leave their nests before they can fly. While I lived in that house, I walked the neighborhood streets every day as a way to know the place. The back screen door would slam as I left the house early in the morning at sunrise, heading to the alley, up the slight rise of Ginter Avenue, turning on Ewell at Jody's house, past Wild Bill's, over to Highland, and past the rectory, turning left on Lower Muscatine, past the stone cottages and Moffat houses, then home to eat breakfast on the back steps. On summer nights, when the heat and humidity made sleeping unbearable, I walked the streets barefoot at midnight. At midnight in winter, I'd shovel the 2 long legs of sidewalk that met at the corner, then lie down in the snow and let silence take over. In this house, I'd been married, and in this house, I found myself alone again. In the face of that rupture, I clung to the house and the yard and the garden and the years turning, and in them I found a bit of safe and solid ground. I began to grow roots, to know time passing in one place, watched the children across the street emerge from diapers to kindergarten to 2-wheelers. In the back of my mind, on its shadowy scrim, where images and people flit behind our eyes and whisper when we are not thinking, I had seen myself grow old in this house. Outside my bedroom window, I watched Ola, 2 doors over, stand in the morning sun, extending her arms to their length with unexpected vigor, running her fingers through waist-length gray hair to dry it. I would smear peanut butter for the birds on the plum tree out back, tutored years before by another old woman for whom I had cared. I wanted to be these old women in this house and have the years of growth and change so seep into my bones that even clouded eyes and dimmed hearing would not keep me from knowing its sounds and its seasons. There's more about this house, I'm going to skip it, about how it became a place of safety for me. By the time I came to live in the house in Iowa City, I had grown tired of having to act as if I knew what I was doing, tired of what it cost to forget how easily I could stumble. I was looking for a safe place, and in this town, in the shoebox house on this corner lot, I found one for a time. At first, every night I'd get into bed, lock all the doors and windows, and then, to be even more certain, I'd slide the bolt on my side of the basement door. I found myself walking home one brilliantly sunny day at noon along a sidewalk arched over railroad tracks, speaking out loud to no one, I'm terrified, terrified. Over and over, my mouth tasting each separate syllable of a word and a conjugation I'd never said, never known, never considered before. And then I had to leave. With a job offer in a different city, I was forced to sell. On the morning that I left the house for good, Ola appeared next door with her long gray hair freshly wet, standing in her garden like an apparition. I went back into the house one last time. Have your feelings, my father had said on the phone the night before, but when you leave, close the door and don't look back, which is, of course, what his parents had done. I had dug up a few more perennials, met the man who was buying the house. He, too, had an old cat he worried about. I told him how to care for the furnace and spent the day lost in a litany. This is the last time I'll ever hear the cat's feet on the basement steps. This is the last time I'll hear the back door slam and echo off the garage across the alley. I passed on the stories, handed over the keys, but I couldn't follow my father's advice. What filled the back seat of my car as I drove away was not the plants or the cats, but the weight of loss. It sat leaden above the wheel wells, trailed off in doubt. It ran like the soundtrack at the end of a movie as the camera pulls back and music tears at your breathing. In conversations with friends and family members spread across the continent, I tried to explain why leaving that house was a loss like death. I never found the words. How do you explain attachment to a place? When I lost my marriage, friends were kind, sympathetic, patient. They gave me time to grieve. When I lost my house, there was a moment of sympathy, but no one was patient. It was time to move on, they said. I gave up on words and on trying to explain. I practiced denial and silenced myself. For years, I tamped down these memories, stayed far away, and eluded their draw. I managed to breathe evenly and recite only the story of surfaces. I had owned a house, I had sold it, I had left town. All I knew in those days was that it was yet another loss. So I moved to Michigan, tried to feel at home, never did, bought a house, but kept returning to Iowa City as often as I could. It began like this. I first encountered R in the pages of a book. My mentor and friend Carl had just published it, a book about weather and gardening, about food and Kate, his wife, about coming to the end of his teaching career, and about the life he and Kate had crafted over 30 years in a century-old house on a hill in the Goosetown neighborhood of Iowa City. R appears in the book briefly, fleetingly, helping Kate with the 60-foot perennial beds at the back of the sweeping lawn behind their house. She appeared in the flesh one day in late September of my sabbatical, her truck crunching up the gravel drive at Carl and Kate's. I'd been expecting her for a month. I was sitting up in the third-floor garret of their house, where each morning for 30 days I had been trying to write. Carl had given me explicit and detailed directions for what to pay attention to, what to pick and when, how to cook it, how to freeze it, how to protect it from deer. But I had been told not to worry about the perennial beds because R would come to take care of them. The heavy heat of late August days and nights had given way to cooler nights, cooler rains, late September's harvest moon hanging full over the hill, blurred by light fog as the heated earth met evening air. I felt the weight of precedence and obligation. I looked out the window one morning, and there was R walking up the dew-soaked lawn, sunlight still just above the horizon, drenching everything with a lemon wash. We sat on the stone ledge of the gazebo, choking mugs of tea, our elbows tight, shoulders hunched against the chill. Her voice was husky like a smoker's. Murray, her butterscotch and white shaggy dog, was patient. It wasn't really cold, but cold was coming. And for the past few years, R had been leaving town as soon as it did, heading south to a small village on the shore of Belize. We exchanged bits of information, talked as strangers do. Carl and Kate, absent, were a thin connecting thread we each held tentatively, skirting privacy. For half an hour we sat, then I went back up to the garret desk and she dragged an oilcloth tarp up the hill and began to clean and weed and deadhead. Wiry, deeply tan, with long stringy blonde hair hanging loose, she worked harder and faster than anyone I'd ever seen. From the third floor garret, I watched the canvas of Kate's garden emerge, newly textured, with brushstrokes of color and lines more clearly defined. In a couple of hours, she dragged the loaded tarp back down the hill and was gone. The next day and the next, we sat and talked on the cold stone ledge till we warmed, and then each went back to work. When Carl and Kate returned, R and I spent an afternoon on the patio with them listening to tales of their trek through the Canadian Rockies. And a few days later, before I left to drive back to Michigan, I followed directions to her place south of town, off a dirt road next to the river. We had agreed that I would come back to live in her cabin for the remainder of my sabbatical, take care of her dog and cat while she escaped from the coming cold. She told me where the keys were hidden, showed me how to keep the wood stove going and how to call the cat. "What will you do with your cats?" she asked, suddenly anxious. "What will happen to them when you come here?" A complicated but convenient choreography was unfolding. A student of mine needed to get away from family and was happy to have the chance to live on her own with my cats. My need to be in Iowa City, ours need to be barefoot in Belize. We shared a certain kind of tug on the heart that deep desire for a place brings. What was said in those first few handfuls of minutes to foster this kind of trust? What tests did we each pass with the other that got us to this point? How was it we tumbled into the landscape of each other's lives so completely in those very few days? Nothing about where this part of the story leads or has ended makes as much sense as the meager threads of its beginning. If you can get out the door early, quickly enough, and head down the road away from the river toward open fields, toward the quarry, you can see the end of dawn, an orange crowning, bleeding on the horizon. You can look squarely at the forbidden. You can turn and see a ribbon of pink slice the trees. If you are still, you can hear them, you can see them shiver, grateful. You can see a red-tailed hawk flash from the trees on the road ahead of you, then another, like guilty lovers, caught, anxious not to be noticed. By then, day has flooded everywhere, and you can turn back. And maybe as you reach the river, the cabin door, and the fire inside, the bald eagle will have stirred, dropping out of a high oak, coasting eye level in front of you, then circling upriver. Listen. It is early March. Sun breaks horizon over the pony shed in the back pasture at 6:25. Hurry. Leave now. You do not know who lingers, who's waiting, what will be swooping low over the river one last time before moving north where ice is breaking up. You do not know what waits around the bend or what your watchfulness will bring to light. Day 1. I sit in the front room of a cabin lined with windows almost to the floor on 2 walls, a fireplace on the 3rd. The windows bring the outside in, the trees, the bend in the river, the dusk, the geese, the snow-heavy sky. I have settled into this cabin as if I have been pulled in by the open arms of the spirit of the place. Nestled in pillows on the wicker couch, I look around and it's as if I have always lived here, as if every item on the wall, on the mantelpiece, on the shelves, every piece of pottery or glass has been placed there by me, as if I know all the stories, as if I had been the one to select and settle each thing into its right spot, groups and pieces arranged contrapuntally, Depression-era vases beside reed baskets and lead crystal sherry glasses filled with tiny pink shells from Caribbean beaches. Day 5. Day after day touches some deep sorrow, some wound I cannot name. There is longing, there is sadness, even as there is, I realize, an emotion I have never known. I walk the dog to the mailboxes, then beyond. Say the word, joy. So simple it becomes pure sound, a sound with no history, no meaning. I'm like a child with no other words. All I can think is that I do not want to think about why I have never, in all the decades of memory, known it. Nor do I want to examine too much what has occasioned it. I walk into the woods, pushing aside the dried and withered abundance of summer, following matted trails. I stand in the drive at night, waiting for the cat's slight rustling, the glow from town lighting the sky to the north over the river. The river is dark, running silent and deep, far below the surfaces I have walked. Day 20. Earlier this morning, when I was walking down the road, an eagle flew off downriver, which pulled from me a deep intake of breath, of both startle and awe. And then these words, unbidden, unknown, just came out of my mouth. What have I done to deserve so much? Not just one good thing, but such a surfeit. And there I was, tears brimming over from a deep sadness I had not known I carried or had buried, not at all clear even what it was. I live with the echo of those questions for days and months, trying to name what burdens I have shouldered, what it is I find moving out into flight over the river, into the night, mingling with the geese flocks murmuring, dissipating as fog lifts off the road at sunrise. So that was the first time I lived in R's cabin, and I kept coming back. And I'm going to skip to the third time for the last section. It feels a little like the site of some industrial accident, Pam said when she stopped here on her way across country. I had told her about this place after I lived here the second time for a full 6 months, about the birds, the marsh and beaver, the isolation and silence. Like an industrial accident, she said, and I did a double take, wondering how we could be seeing such different things. We had just left the pavement of Izaak Walton Road, passing the silver maple where the barred owls fledged. I turned to the river, and for a few dismal seconds, I realized what it might look like if you hadn't seen it over time, hadn't seen it at dawn or dusk, hadn't stood with the cormorants swooping silently over you, hadn't stood at midnight in the frigid air in flannel, listening to the geese huddled into the river's elbow, or been watched daily by the eagles hanging out on those broken treetops. Listen to these details again. Sand and gravel pits, a field of recycled cars, 2 concrete plants, a river lined by trees with their tops sheared off. It's not pretty. What is going on beneath the surface of this place? Am I driving the road for the last season before the landowner clear-cuts both sides? What is it exactly that the sand and gravel company does? What happened to the marsh? What am I looking at when I peer into it? A formerly open waterway now increasingly clogged with invasive vegetation? A rich wetland drained by development elsewhere? What is it that brings all the birds? Why this turn in the river? And just what does it mean that one man owns the land, but individuals own the houses on them? Did I mishear when R said the lease would eventually revert to the county? What are the legal terms of what is bound to whom? Is this, as it seemed to me 2 years ago, a hidden refuge for birds as well as broken spirits? Or do I need more of Pam's tutelage to see the poison at its core? Probably neither. I read a story about what's come back in the Chernobyl region years after the nuclear meltdown. Neglect is a double-edged knife. It allows life to flourish at the same time that it invites or allows transgression and damage. We have not been encouraged to understand these complicated interweavings of systems, how fragile they are in the face of even small interferences. Pam resumed, "Who was Izaak Walton?" I didn't know. Later, I went looking. An 18th century British gentleman who wrote a book on fishing, a writer I'd never heard of, namesake of a conservation organization I knew nothing about. And then I began to realize that there was a lot more that I didn't know about life off Izaak Walton Road, where the Iowa River bends back upon itself, heading north before it turns south again. Not just the place names, not just the names and kinds of birds and the wildlife that inhabited the places I didn't see, how it came to be habitat for such a rich range of birds, but also how some of the land came to be quarried and dug up. Who tended these places and had owned them? What went on in the transit between dark and dawn, dawn and light, light and dusk? And so, in the winter and spring of yet another year, with a third opportunity to spend time living in the cabin on the gravel road along the Iowa River, I set out to learn. Thank you. I'm sorry that took a little longer than I thought.
Are we on here? Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for this book. I just,
Thank you.
before we engage in conversation, I just want to mention that this is actually a conversation that Laura and I have been having for a long time, and I just figured out it's been 30 years. We have some shared history. We were both in the graduate program in English here at the University of Iowa at the same time, though our paths didn't cross then. I was starting and you were finishing. But our paths first crossed actually in East Lansing, Michigan, which Laura talks about. I had applied for a job and got a 2-year position at Michigan State where Laura was teaching and was on the search committee and
Yeah.
picked me up at the airport, I think. And so since then, I think we've had this conversation about place and what it means to love a place, what it means to not love a place. And eventually, obviously, we both ended up back in Iowa City. Our paths were different, our timelines were different, but here we are, back in Iowa City. So that's sort of the main, or the first, or larger question I would start us off with is, what does it mean to love a place, or maybe not love a place? But love a place, especially as you so elegantly described in that last section, a place that is not necessarily lovable on the surface. This is not a place that is going to appear in a travel magazine or a place that, vacationers are going to come to necessarily. But it is clearly a place that is very meaningful to you and that you love, that you loved and still love. So what does it mean to love a place?
Yeah, I told you that was the question that's really hard for me to talk about. That actually is what generated the book, really, in many ways. I have many stories about how I came to write this, but it started with trying to say, what is it about this place that has so grabbed me, and trying to articulate it. And I think part of it is that it's not going to appear on a travel magazine, that it is so secluded and so quiet, and that's what many people who live there love about it. And that was part of it. It was so secluded, so set off and unavailable to other people. But it's more than that. And the opposite, as you said, about having a hard time feeling at home in the place that you live. And one of the things I skipped over is I spent my childhood, I grew up on Long Island, a suburb of New York City, and I spent my childhood running away in a variety of forms. Some of it just going to the end of the block and into a secluded corner and finding a way to have my own space. Some of it literally running away from home. Running to the opposite side of the country as quickly as I could. And so I had a lot of experience not feeling at home, living in places that I didn't feel spoke to me. And unfortunately, Lansing was one of them. I lived there for 30 years. And struggled in all those places and at all those times to figure out an answer to that question. I don't know, but something speaks to the heart and at a particular moment. And for me, ours space, she had crafted a space that was clearly very sacred to her. I didn't know that at the time, but I felt it. And I think that's part of what grabbed me. I needed that seclusion and that solitude at that point in my life. I don't know, you have your place that speaks to your family and that you love.
Right, we had talked about this a few days ago in preparation too. My family and I go to a pond in northern Minnesota near the Boundary Waters every year, a place we love dearly. We don't own the cabin. The cabin itself, I would say, is pretty beautiful, but it's on a pond that's a boreal pond that is acidic water. There's no fishing, there's no swimming, there is peat bog and swampy areas around it, but we think it's beautiful and we love it, and a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think that, especially folks who want to go on vacation in northern Minnesota. And my favorite way to talk about this is that they're also in the peat bog around the pond because of the environment, because of the kind of water and environment it is. There are carnivorous plants, and one of them is called sundew, and actually the pond has been called Sundew Pond, and the other one are pitcher plants. And we have two grown children. My son is 33 now, but I still am tickled by an elementary school assignment that he had. And it was actually one of those what I did on my summer vacation essays he was supposed to write. And he wrote about going to the swamp with the carnivorous plants. So on the surface, yes, this is like, well, this is a strange and weird place. Partly that's why we love it. But there's something about it that really, really captured our hearts, and I've written about it. So
Yeah.
that leads to, I think, thinking about writing. You're a writer. This is a book. So we're both interested in writers of place and writing about place. And so could you talk a little bit about what does it mean to be a writer of place, especially that element of what we might call the relationship between an external landscape and then the internal landscape, the self?
Yeah. I've taught, as you know, I've taught classes about writing about place and nature writing, and it's, as many of you probably know, it's a huge genre, and there are many ways of writing about place. I want to pick up on your son, the story about your son, because I think one of the ways of loving a place is that, for me, and it sounds like for you all too, discovering things about it, discovering the small pieces that, you know, that here the river runs down, that here I can remember being a kid camping somewhere and with a tiny, tiny stream behind the campground and just putting rocks and pebbles in to make the stream go a different way, to change the course of it. That as you interact with the small pieces of a place and learn things about it, learn the names of plants, learn the names of birds, I think that helps to imprint the place on you. So I read a lot of writers about place, and the ones that speak to me the most are the ones that pay attention to both the physical and the non-physical aspects of a particular place, the spirit of a place, as well as how that interacts with the history and the details, the scientific or technical details of a place. I started writing, as I said, to try to understand why this place, what is it about it? I'd go back to Michigan and people would say Iowa, which I'm used to. Everybody's used to. But then I'd describe it, and I knew that they were envisioning someplace beautiful. But I needed to try to explain it to myself. What is it that's grabbing me? Especially because it was very clear to me, this is not mine. I found ways to come back to the cabin, and for a period of time, that worked, and I'll just say that. But it was difficult, and it was very clear that it was not mine. One time I came back and R had changed the furniture around, and I walked in and I just was startled, like, you can't do this to my place. And that butting up against, it's not mine. And so I started trying to write about the particulars. Like, I'm just going to document what does it look like? What's on the walls? What has she planted in the garden? How does that view get created by the choices she made? And in writing about the particulars, I'll just go into this part we've talked about. In writing about the particulars, I kept my focus on the exterior. And every time I'd share parts of the manuscript with people, they'd say, where are you in this? You're not in this. And I kept saying, this is not about me. This is about this place. It took me a long time to realize that by attending to the details of the place, I was writing about myself, or there was something about myself that I needed to explore, and that it was that inner experience that I was reluctant to go into. I had to get over that.
I guess another leads to another question. I guess we have to leave time for some Q&A too, but maybe a last question. And you've already talked a little bit about this, but relating to a place and also writing about place as you said, is about attention to details. And is there more you might be able to say about that idea of paying attention, both in terms of relating to the natural world, relating to a community or a city, but also being a writer about that place? One of my favorite quotations, I don't know if I'll get it exactly right, is from the poet Mary Oliver. And I have it as sort of a motto for myself. And in one of her poems, she talks about instructions for living a life. And it's pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. And so is there more you could say maybe about paying attention?
That's about it. Paying attention, being astonished. Yeah. Many times it felt like a cliche, pay attention, I'm paying attention. But the more I paid attention, the more I paid attention. The more I paid attention, the more I found there was more to ask and see. So I ended what I read on a bunch of questions, but throughout there are questions I kept finding that I hadn't asked. My mother was a birder. She loved to pay attention to birds. I paid attention to birds wherever I lived and grew up. But then I realized I hadn't really paid attention. There was so much more. One of my favorite parts of writing this is the story of when I first realized there was a barred owl. I would sit and read, and at night I could hear this sound, and it was so strong I could feel it in my chest. And it was several nights before I even thought to say, what is that? When I say that out loud, that sounds very bizarre. How could you not wonder? And then I thought, I wonder if it's a wolf? No, there's no wolves. Coyote? No, that's not. I don't know. Oh, it's probably an owl. Like, I felt really stupid for not realizing that right away. And it was right outside the window. And then it took me a long time to find out what kind of owl. So I was really interested in also the process of how our attention gets pulled to something. What is it that pulls us to look closer and start asking those questions? That's a different way. That's both paying attention to what's in front of you, but also paying attention to your own process about paying attention. It's a little bit meta there, but yeah. I don't know what else to say.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we should move to a time for some questions from the audience. And Anne or Maeve will have a microphone here if there are any questions.
You have to raise your hands.
Thank you. My name is Margaret. You've given me lots of food for thought. And what I want to ask you to talk a bit more about, if it is meaningful, is the state of homesickness in place. I live between two continents, two different worlds. And when I'm away from one for too long, homesickness kicks in. And I've tried to pay attention to that and understand it. So I'm inspired by your paying attention and wondered how you would think about that.
Thank you. That is, no one has asked me that. There actually was a piece in the book that I took out that was titled Homesick. I found I couldn't really address it directly, which is the reason I took it out. But it is definitely there, and I So there's a whole part I skipped over about the fact that my grandparents were born in a different country, and my mother was born late in my grandmother's life here. And she made the choice that many immigrants do to completely cut off her any desire to know anything about her past. And so I grew up with a sense of homesickness that wasn't mine. I grew up with, I think, her feelings that she never acknowledged, and my own feelings that I was somehow attached to a place I had never seen. It took me a long time to recognize that. So I think of homesickness as in a very broad sense, but I also know that there are places that I feel deeply, there are other places I feel deeply at home in, but do not live and cannot live in. And I came to think of that as longing that's connected to loss, lots of different kinds of loss. What is it we lose when we can't be in a place? Some of it's sounds and feelings and visual sights and language. Yeah. There's no answer. It is. It is. Thank you.
So I wasn't born in the United States either, and I spent 40 years as a professor in Muncie, Indiana. So I feel like you all taught 30, but I did 40, so I'm sitting here thinking, only 30. But David and I are art professors, retired, and we chose Iowa City as our place. So my interest is I know why I chose Iowa City. And sometimes people don't know why I chose Iowa City, but I don't care that they don't. But anyway, I'm digressing. Why did you choose Iowa City?
Yeah, I ended up here for graduate school. And I seem to have these experiences. It was supposed to be a temporary place, as graduate school is supposed to be. And I sat down on the edge of the Iowa River, and I can still conjure this moment. And I said, no, this is where I'm going to live. There was no reason, and that's how I always felt. I kept finding ways to come back. And so I knew I was leaving. As soon as I stopped teaching at Michigan State, I knew I was coming back here. I don't know why I chose it. It chose me. I connected. I don't know. Why did you choose? Because?
I chose because when I'm driving to Iowa City from Muncie, somewhere in Illinois, there's a transition between my chattering monkey mind that's mad about everything happening in my life and in my profession. When I get close to the river, something changes.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely share that. For me, it's when I cross the bridge. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. Is the cabin still there?
Yes, it is.
Do you not want to talk about it?
I am in the midst of making decisions. Yes, it is. I just learned a couple of weeks ago that R has died, and the ownership has turned to someone else. It is there. It is empty of most of her things. It doesn't look anything like what I remember, which is fine. It took me a long time to let go of my attachment to to that place in the way that I felt attached. And that's why it took me a long time to write the book, because every time I'd come back, something would have changed. And it was the flood of 2008 that really separated. And the cabin was flooded, and as it had been in previous floods in Iowa City in '93, and I think there was another one. And so it was rebuilt, redone inside, not rebuilt, but redone inside, and it's completely different, which is okay. But it was the flood and what I came to realize, somehow that finally made me realize I had moved on. Or, I don't like that phrase. The attachment had waned. Yeah, but it's there, yep. And
By a river? By the river now?
no, I live downtown, and I miss the river, yep. Or close to downtown.
So the theme that I heard you reading about, that dissonance, the quarries and the cement factories, and then the natural world. And I'm just curious, because I also hear a real sense of settledness. And like, I just wonder if you could describe or explore, or if you have any opinions about that settledness in the middle of that dissonance. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, it kind of surprised me. But I think we all sort of do this kind of selective paying attention. When my friend Pam, I kept trying, let me back up. I kept trying to find something in Lansing, Michigan, the middle of Michigan, to feel at home about. And there are places where I could drive outside of town that felt like Iowa, fields, and we were driving. I was driving with Pam once to Chelsea, nice little town. And I made some comment about the landscape, and she immediately said, "I can't look at those fields of corn. All I see is poison, and the farm workers being poisoned by the insecticide." And I just wanted to smack her. Like, you are ruining everything for me. But that taught me that sense of, what someone else sees is not what we see. And conversely, I was trying to find the things that would allow me to, I'm not sure this is what you mean by settled, but to settle in my heart and being, living in a place. So I think we do that all the time in many ways. By what process a particular place, allows us to see things in a particular place to latch onto, I have no idea. It's a mystery, and I'm fine with it being a mystery.
We have time for one more question. I see the questioner. Thank you. Actually, I have so many questions, but they'll have to set up a private time to talk to you.
I think we can do that.
Okay. I have 3. First, is this a view from the cabin?
Oh, thank you. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Unlike many writers and books, I got to insist that the cover photo be the place.
Great.
Yeah.
Second, because you're such a great visual writer, and I always see things when I read, and I'm really particular with architecture. Could you draw me just a little schematic in the book of like how the cabin is laid out and where the river is? So when I'm reading, I can really be in the right spot to visualize?
I actually had I don't know if it was one particular piece. If you haven't looked at the book, these are all very, very, very short pieces. One particular piece, or it was part of another piece where I sort of tried to lay it out, and readers told me it was too confusing. Don't bother. I'm just like, but I'm very visual too. Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. And then the last one is, why do you think she sent the slippers back? That started to make me cry when I read
know.
it.
That's another mystery. I don't know. I don't know.
Nobody can explain.
Val knew R, and and she asked me a question about something R had done, and I said, I know what she said, but I don't really know. I have no idea. Interesting. Anyway, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Tom. Copies of the book are available for sale through Prairie Lights, and if you'd like to have more conversation, Laura will be outside there signing, and you can ask questions then. Thank you.